everybody. It's Sunday night. The name of the show is Intuitive Inc., and I am Servet Hassan. I've got a really great show for you tonight. I always say that, but this one's a really good one today. I really love this woman. I read her book. It's called Beyond the Imprint, and we're going to talk about what that means. Her name is Kate O'Connell. She is a child and family therapist with a private practice in Charlottesville, Virginia. And for those of you, all my peeps out there that got my blast, I wanted to tie in the events that happened in Charlottesville. So we're going to talk to her about that too, because she's worked with the therapeutic needs of children, adolescents, adults, families. She's got this extensive training, not only on the holistic side, but on the actual Western medical side. So welcome, Kate O'Connell. Thank you for joining me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, thanks. I know it's late in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's 9:00 at night. And here you are on a Sunday. And so I'm honored and privileged, and I thank you for taking your personal time to be on the show and talk about this, because it's important.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I wanted to read, I also wanted to mention the subtitle. It's called Beyond the Imprint, and you're going to explain what that means, but the subtitle is A New Modality for Mental Health Practitioners and Those Seeking Their Help. So, and I read in your book that you wrote that you actually wrote this book because it was the kind of book you really wished you could have read and had access to when you were in graduate school. So that
Yes.
made a lot of sense. The best books I've read are the books that people want, the people that write them want to actually read that book themselves,
Yes.
Right. Okay, let's start at the beginning, because I know you did go up on a mountain and you did worked with a medicine woman. So, let's start at the beginning. How did this all, not way at the beginning, because you've led a very interesting life, and we can touch on that, because I also did read in your book that part of why we teach things and write, we are teaching when we write, but we write them because it helps us learn a lot too, So I think the book was a healing process for you too, I believe, right?
Oh, it was definitely a healing process, but true to my patterns, unconscious patterns, I would not have written it had I understood that it was for me. So always motivated by helping the other, only to discover shortly into it that I'm not excluded from that experience.
That's right. That's the basis of all my workshops, by the way. I go in there thinking, I'm really going to help these people. I really go in genuinely trying to be helpful and see people's. It's my goal to see people leave the room a different person than they were when they came in, a better person. Otherwise, what's the point? There's all these all these new age, new thought, you and then you go home and nothing happens, It's I kind of really want people to change. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I go, ooh, I guess I needed to know that, it's kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
We're all reflections. That's the point.
Right. Okay.
And we often forget that.
That's right. And so let's start at the beginning. I think, were going through a divorce, and you went up and got into these healing modalities. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. Largely got into holistic medicine through chronic health issues going back to when I was a teenager. And then that gradually evolved into spiritual teachers shortly after my divorce. And then that unfolded and evolved into going up into the Adirondacks and co-founding a spiritual retreat center with a Cherokee medicine woman and shaman, and training with her for 5 years and studying.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what brought you down off the mountain, so to speak, literally?
I had the awareness that very few people access the healing that we had to offer, and that I was just responding to a very strong pull to become trained in models of Western medicine, i.e. psychology, in order to reach more people. And I didn't really understand holistically what I was pursuing. It's been this dawning, unfolding awareness as to finally having arrived at creating a modality and writing about it. I understood that this is why I accessed all of the training that I've accessed throughout my whole life, including experiences growing up that I wouldn't, if I had the opportunity to rewrite my life, probably wouldn't include them. But I consider it all training, and because I'm a therapist, I've come to understand that I can only take people as far as I've gone. And I can really, truly only help people to the degree that I really do understand what they've been through. So, you know, the tread marks on me, so to speak, relative to life experience, and then the shamanic training, and then combine that with my clinical training that then evolved into intensive in-home services for 5 years, serving underserved populations. All of that has created a synthesis that I offer to anyone that sits across from me. It's very holistic.
Right. Actually, yes, it is. You know, that's interesting. You called it the tread marks. I have plenty of those. More than I care to mention here. I've been to hell and back a few times. But I honestly think, though, it's like Oprah said. I heard her once. I'm not a big fan, but I heard her once saying that all said and done, she wouldn't change one thing, a hair on a person's head, if she could go back, because she wouldn't be who she is today if she'd done that. So kind of
right, and that is true.
Yeah. Go ahead. Hello? Hello?
Yep.
You there?
You there?
Yes,
yep.
We got you. See, when we're live, you go hello a few times. I lost you for a second, but I honestly think that everything makes us, I also think to some degree we sort of pick the patterns we start with to overcome as we go, kind of. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that would include a very wide perspective that I do speak to if your listeners and have any, belief systems include past lives.
Right.
Then what I understand is we're just working at the level of energy and vibrational resonance, and that because of experiences we've already had, then we come through particular families, and then we end up having situations that are in resonance with the memory that we bring in with us, which is often referred to as karma. But karma is often described by Western spiritual seekers very similar to what sin would be described because of their conditioning in the Christian Judaic framework. But all the studying I've done, particularly with a very well-known Hawaiian shaman, just kept reminding us that karma is just neutral. It's just memory.
Right.
And so that's also a version of imprint. So we start by bringing in the imprinting from other lifetimes, and then we have the imprinting from the moment that we're conceived, and we take in all the memory of our respective DNA lineages, and then we're implanted in our first environment in the womb. And depending on mom's stress levels, we're imprinted then, and then we're born, and depending on the environment that we're born into, then we're imprinted again. And these are all in resonance with what we've experienced before, and as we continue into adulthood, we continue to cycle through experiences that create these patterns that you referred to, because we continue unconsciously to seek out similar experiences in an unconscious attempt to resolve our original traumas. And so everything is an opportunity to awaken from. And that's why I think this modality is so profound and why it's changed so many people's lives.
Right, exactly. Well, the Indian gurus that I worked with taught me, karma, the Sanskrit translation for it is action. So it can be good or bad. It's neutral. So it's what we, do with that karma as we go along. But the basis of Beyond the Imprint for me is that these are things that are imprinted on a cellular level. It's cellular imprinting you're talking about, right?
Well, because that's where the memory is held.
Right.
The memory is held in the 50 trillion cells of our body. It's somatic, and that's one of the things that people don't really understand until they take a closer look, because we've been so conditioned in this dualistic paradigm in the age of enlightenment and reason to think that everything's happening in the head, including how we think and how we store memory. But the memory is actually stored in the body.
Right, exactly. And then because like even you talked about your first word. You said your first word was Alleluia, and then you were imprinted from that because people were like, well, who are you to say that? Is your first
right.
word. Why
well,
isn't
the collective refrain in the family was that didn't happen.
Well, that's where we get our first conditioning from, is from our tribe, our family. It's just, we start to get imprinted at a very young age, even, like you said, even in the womb, and then right away, usually.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why I agree with you. Because I think sometimes talk therapy, I'm not going to say anything's good or bad. I'm not a psychologist, but I think sometimes if you're just going over the same story over and over again and again, I think all you're doing is reinforcing it, because you're just giving that imprint more power. Right?
Yes, exactly. I like to tell people to think of the imprint like a groove in a vinyl record. And you're just reinforcing it and you're making it deeper. And people's narratives are their biggest defense mechanism. And their narrative is usually designed to present themselves as the victim. Mm-hmm. And so it reinforces victimology, and it just is extremely unhelpful, and it doesn't change anything.
Well, right.
At all.
And by narrative, I think too, is that the same? Is that kind of correlates with our stories? The stories we tell about our stories, right? And that's kind of what happened with, you touched on that a little bit in the book too, is kind of what happens to us when we've had, our I think you called them schemas. The
schemas, yes.
Yeah, and that they could, exactly. That, even when we have a collective happening like Columbine, like 9/11, and the events that just occurred in Charlottesville, it's because it's out of our norm of what we perceive as normal, and then it's out of our storyline, kind of. Is that correct? Is that
right?
Mm-hmm.
So the schemas develop unconsciously in response to experience. And what they do is they allow us to take shortcuts where we can infer future probabilities. And so we assume, without even realizing that we're assuming, what we can and can't expect in our environments and in our experiences based on what's happened prior to now. Mm-hmm. And so things that have never happened before at the scale that they show up have the tendency to really knock us sideways. Right. And there's a point where, and depending on your age, so the younger you are, obviously with developing brain and early on in schematic development, it's much easier to get knocked sideways, which is why most of our trauma imprinting has occurred in very, very young ages. And because we don't have the capacity to process what's going on and understand that despite the fact that everybody's freaking out or things seem like they're out of control, we can't fundamentally count on the fact that we're going to survive that when we're really young. And so even as adults, with what occurred a couple of weekends ago in Charlottesville, we got the opportunity to observe that playing out as well, because it's not something that had ever been experienced in this city before.
Right. Yeah, it had a big impact. Did you feel it? Did you feel that impact within your community?
Oh, there's no question about it. And interestingly enough, where the car actually impacted that crowd of people was right outside the front door of where I started my private practice. I lived right there for a number of years, not too long ago. And when I came home a few nights after this from running an errand, I purposely drove by the location because I wanted to just get a sense of what was and how much had dissipated. And when I drove right past that street, I felt like something had punched me in the heart. That was the trauma. And the trauma is still being held there. The imprint isn't just in our bodies, it's also in the land. And so the more attention is given, the more people that show up and focus on the trauma, the deeper it is and the more it's imprinted in that actual location. And you can feel it. You can actually feel it when you're there.
Oh, I bet. I went to Ground Zero at 9/11 years later. I mean, a couple of years later, and you could still feel it. I mean, you could.
Oh, you can. Yeah.
It's palatable. You can. And
it will continue to be like that because of the memorial and what everyone brings to it. Mm-hmm. Everyone brings memory of trauma and the sobriety there and how somber it is. You will feel it. Those are the energetics that are still going to be there and very much imprinted. Yes.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about how do we change our because this is the challenge we see. I'm a big fan of epigenetics. I'm a Joe Dispenza fan, Dr. Joe Dispenza. I think you did you read a lot of who's the book that the guy that started epigenetics? Yeah, yeah, exactly. What's the name of his?
The biologist.
The biology of
belief.
Right. Yeah, he kind of started on it, and epigenetics is really important because it's the first. It's what, to my understanding, it's that our brain is not hardwired. We do have a plastic brain. We can restructure our brain and reconnect neurons to think differently. Right?
Right. But even more impressive is that we can actually change our DNA.
That's right. Okay. So how do people, especially people that have gone through trauma, because I have clients I have one client who, her mother, when she was like 3 or 4 years old, her mother, every time she asked for something to eat, she would burn her with a cigarette. And to this day, this woman has cigarette burns on her arms that she covers nicely, but they're still there. And she's turned out to be the CEO of a huge, successful, dynamic company that she founded. And then I have another client who's she just said her mother liked her sister better, and she's turned out doing not much of anything. She's been struggling her whole life. So somewhere in there, it's like it's how we're dealing with those what you called, I think, the uncarved block, and then it gets carved, and then we have all this on our DNA and our imprinting. What is it that gets someone to change it and someone not to?
So at the moment that we've been imprinted by an event that has overwhelmed us and had us feeling that our survival hung in balance, that particular moment is encoded in the frequency of fear. It's flash frozen in the frequency of fear at that particular emotional and chronological age. And so when you connect people to these moments, then they will often regress emotionally. And that's when you know the age in which significant traumas have happened. And so there's a charge there. So you want to blow the charge off of it. You don't want to allow the client to keep telling their victim stories because that just keeps re-energizing the charge. And you want to have them understand that all of these unconscious imprints are informing their very limiting perceptions and beliefs about themselves and their environment and those in their environment. And that even as adults, they're still showing up unconsciously defending those imprints when something in the environment, a stimulus that resonates with a trauma from an earlier age, activates. You actually become activated. I use the example of road rage in traffic as a perfect example. When your reactivity to what's happening, it far exceeds what's actually happening. It's because of very old memory when your survival hung imbalance became activated. So, depending on how old you were when these traumas occurred is going to also determine the difficulty of releasing them. But they can be released by first helping the person understand what they're at the effect of and training them how to respond to stimulus that's stressful in the environment that could potentially activate these memories. And if you can create space between the stimulus and your response and allow your nervous system to recover, and so you can have a more neutral response, then that's the beginning of dissolving these imprints because you're no longer reinforcing them. Another aspect to this is you really need to be supporting the physical body, and you have to be supporting the brain with really good nutrition. You need to be supporting the adrenals because chances are, I think the whole country has adrenal fatigue because of what we feed off of mainstream media on a regular basis. And so we want to really support the physical body. We want to be taking care of ourselves. Self-care is a reflection of self-love. And so we really want to be doing things that nurture us, body work, because the memory is in the body. Any modality that is somatic, energy medicine, all modalities within energy medicine are very healing for releasing these imprints. And so there's a lot of things that we can be doing, but the most important is to start by becoming aware of what we've been at the effect of our whole life without realizing it.
Right. And also what triggers that is, and then the way you put it too in your book is that then you need to hit the pause button, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Because unless we go back
letting go,
Go ahead.
Letting go is the key, and that's counterintuitive to people who've been traumatized.
Right. Because, some people are holding on to things on purpose because there's a payoff there to some degree.
Well, see, I wouldn't say it that way. I'd say it a little differently. So everybody is holding on to what they're holding on to,
right?
Because it's their defenses. It's what's actually allowed them to stay on the planet. So we celebrate the defenses when I start working with someone. We don't judge them. We just acknowledge, look, they got you this far. You're still breathing. You're in the body. So now you realize that they are now the stumbling blocks and the obstacles for you to have your desired experience. So everybody, whatever you're holding on to as a defense mechanism is always from fear. So, the absence of imprints is self-actualization and enlightenment. So we're all going to be working on this for lifetimes.
Well, good. That's a good way to put it. Right.
Yeah. There's always going to be something we're not quite ready to let go of as it relates to surrender and not needing to control what's in our environment in order to feel safe. And parents of children and adolescents could probably relate to that.
Right. Yeah. That it's not something out there. It's always going to be something inside of us. You had you talk about the shadow self and that at some point we need to embrace all of that. So I think that's kind of what you just said. It's like, yes, it got us this far. It's our, we all have that side of us.
Right. And so the shadow material is the shame imprinting, which is part of all of our imprints. And it's certainly been reinforced through centuries of conditioning. And so it's what we suppress out of fear that if anybody got a glimpse, they would run screaming in the opposite direction. And so we are all attempting to get our emotional and physical needs met, no matter what anybody is doing, however they're showing up, how ridiculous or violent it appears. It's still the same agenda. We all have the same agenda. We're attempting to get our emotional and physical needs met. And so to what degree are we defending what it is that we can't even accept about ourselves. And so that's why with this modality, we work primarily with the self, because this takes it to the quantum level, which is the understanding that when you work on the self and you dissolve these imprints and the subsequent limiting, negative, self-loathing beliefs that we hold about ourselves, everything outside of us changes. The more you come into alignment with yourself, the more you increase your capacity to love yourself, those are both the same thing, then everything outside of you changes, because everything outside of you is a reflection of what you believe to be true about yourself. There's no exception to that.
Right. Well, I truly believe that. I mean, that it's what's inside that creates our outer reality, not the other way around. Not our
right. That usually takes a few sessions for people to clock on board.
I know. Trust me. I know.
Remember, they come in with their narrative.
Well, right. Now,
it's usually the husband's fault or the kid's fault.
Yeah, exactly. It's something out there that's not, and it's the same thing with trying to change your environment, to change your circumstances. You have to change your consciousness beyond your circumstances. Yes. Otherwise, nothing really changes. Otherwise, you can do vision boards, you can do affirmations till you're blue in the face. But unless you change internally, the external doesn't follow. It doesn't,
Right. And you can divorce your husband or wife and move to the other side of the country. And you will, all of your imprinting and all of your patterns will
go with you. Yeah, unless you change internally, right. It's just like I said, if you need a job or just because you change your resume or buy a new suit, that's not going to do it. That's not, there's a little more to that. That's why it's been a long time since The Secret came out. That was like 10 years ago, but people watch that over and over and over again and then would call me and say, why hasn't anything changed? I've done everything and I watched it 1,000 times, and I was like, well, it's probably because you're watching videos all the time. No, but you know what I mean? It has to start on a okay. The other thing I love, you did a little section in your book called What is Normal? And I think that's really important for people to hear, because what normal isn't normal. I mean, I'm not normal. I mean, in terms of what I think other people would think, but I think I'm very normal to myself. I'm very whole. I'm still working on myself every day, or I wouldn't be on this planet. But I think of that as normal, and I like that part of the book. Is that what you think of as normal?
Actually, the what comes to mind is a quote that I heard once, which is, "Normal is a knob on a dryer." Outside of that, I don't think anything is normal. Because it's a very dangerous projection, because it's being utilized by a lot of systems to enforce a lot of control mechanisms that aren't healthy and aren't helpful. And so I talk about in my essay, and which became a chapter in the book on what is normal, is there seems to be this increasing bandwidth of what's perceived collectively as what is normal, particularly with our children and adolescents. And if their behaviors fall out of that bandwidth of normal, then there's a whole lot of energy that goes into controlling and eradicating the behavior. And since talk therapy isn't very helpful, and only 90% of therapists work with adolescents, then that's where we end up with all of our kids being medicated, and the statistics are quite alarming on that.
Right, I read that in the book. I was shocked at how many children, adolescents, and young children, little children, are being medicated. Yep. It's unbelievable to me, but I agree, because I've never thought, to me, it's about being yourself to your fullest. That's when
Correct.
You are you to your fullest ability, and that you have to love yourself to be that, and not that kind of egotistical love, but that kind of internal self love that's healthy, that's part of it, then I think that's normal, but that's not what society would say. So I totally.
No, the collective perception of that is it's all about conformity.
Right. Which, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I end my show.
And the irony is I have a quick little story because it's very ironic.
Go ahead.
That chapter started out as an essay on my clinical website. And in response to it, and I considered myself a bottom feeder, I was alone in private practice, small private practice on the downtown mall, UVA Child and Family Psychiatry, that essay was brought to their attention and they filed a formal complaint against me with the mental health counseling board that licenses me. So that essay on normal and describing that that we have undertaken the largest social experiment in history with medicating our children and adolescents got the attention of the entity in Charlottesville that is the go-to entity for mental health, the experts on mental health.
Oh, and they didn't like you.
No, they would. Apparently, I thought of myself as this tiny little bottom feeder, and it rattled their cage.
Well, it's a big business, this pharmaceutical stuff.
It's a very big business, and there are no longitudinal studies to date that have not been funded by pharmaceutical companies showing that there is no negative impact on the developing brain.
Well, and you keep doing what you're doing. Please.
Thank you.
It's important.
Now that the book is out, I am standing on a big platform, and I'm saying it to as many people as far and wide as I can.
Good. And so should you. And that, I end my show every week. I end it by saying be you to the full, because that's what's really beautiful, and that's what turns your life around. That's what gets you past everything, because if you're just loving yourself and being true to yourself and all of that, and you can't do that if you're medicated. You can't.
No, you can't. And there's no one in the 12 years that I've done this work. I haven't had one adolescent tell me that they liked how it felt. And once I got in private practice, I can actually say this, every child and every adolescent that came to work with me stopped taking their meds and functioned better.
Good. And that's what it's all about. Yeah. And if that's your job on this planet, then hallelujah. Alleluia, actually. You said your first word, and onward and upward with that. This is a good time to stop and let people call in if they have a question for you, Kate. I mean, you know what you're talking about here, and I love the book. Again, the name of the book is Beyond the Imprint. It's a new modality for mental health practitioners and those seeking their help. It's very helpful, even if you never actually have a chance to have a session with Kate O'Connell. You can still buy her book and learn a great deal and understand a great deal, and hopefully move forward from there. But if you have a question for Kate, call in now, 949-313-8880. We're already past halfway through the show, actually, so we don't have a lot of time. So if anybody has any questions about therapy or being in therapy, or question about your own mental health and will this help you, or how to get past your own imprints, something that's in your DNA that you just can't seem to get rid of, call, because now's the time to ask. She's on the phone. And then what happens is, Kate, after the show, I get 997 emails saying, I had a question, but I didn't think of it in time. So how can people get hold of you if that's the case? Do you take new patients? Do you take them if they're not in Charlottesville? How do you operate?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yes. They can email me. They can call me, and all that information is on my clinical website, which is my name backwards, o'connellkate.com.
We have a call, so hold on. We'll spell that for you guys. Hold on. Hello, caller. Caller? Hello, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. Who's calling in? What's your name?
This is Lisa, and I'm from South Carolina.
Hi, Lisa from
And
South
I had
Carolina.
a question.
Good. Absolutely.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very good. And Kate's on the line, and you ask her anything you like. Lisa, thank you for calling in today.
You're
Hey,
welcome.
Lisa.
Hi, Miss Kate. How are you doing?
I'm great. How can I help you?
Well, I was just wondering, is there any easy steps to change your DNA? Is there some steps that I can take to do that?
So,
what is your is there a simple process, I guess?
No, there's not a simple 10-step process for it. This is something that you would be doing over the course of a lifetime. And just knowing that that when you respond differently to the stimulus in your environment, then that is actually changing it. They've done a lot of really interesting research in which they have isolated a donor's DNA in a vacuum in a room separate from where the actual donor is, and then they provide different stimulus to the donor, and depending on whether the stimulus is pleasant or painful, and the donor has an emotional response to it, they can actually measure at the moment that the donor has an emotional response that the DNA either constricts or expands. So what you would be doing is you would be training yourself in modalities such as anything to do with mindfulness, meditation, qigong, tai chi, anything that you could practice on a daily basis that would maintain your nervous system, have it be sort of in a state of equilibrium to the best of your ability as you move through the day. And obviously, depending on your life, as you move through the day, there's always going to be stressors showing up in the environment. And so it takes a lot of practice to be able to become detached, to become the observer of your own experience, and to recognize that what's happening outside of you is just a reflection of what you're holding to be true about yourself, and you start to work with what's outside of you as material. I refer to it as material. I mean, I still have very challenging days, but I don't constrict around it as much as I used to, because I recognize that the material has provided me an opportunity to have a very different response to how I normally would have responded. And so the goal is to be as neutral as possible, to not take things personally, and to take really good care of yourself. And so there's a whole list of modalities on my website that I describe are really effective, anything that's somatic-based, anything within energy medicine, and meditation is probably one of the best ways to help train yourself.
Okay, I've been really starting to do meditation in the mornings, like just grounding meditations, and but as you're saying that when you're in a situation, you know, like the stressors that you have, either they're negative or positive, could you actually go through scenarios every day with yourself and say, okay, this is what's happening, or have a friend say, okay, this is what's happening, and you hear this and you could react to it? Can that train yourself to go ahead?
The training essentially is about becoming more aware of your own body and how your own body and your own nervous system responds to your environment, and become more aware of when you feel the need to defend yourself, and it usually happens right after your adrenals have become activated, which usually happens when something in the environment has triggered a memory that's being held on to. So it's about whatever that stimulus is, it's always going to be a stressor. You know, we tend to live very busy lives. We tend to overdo and overextend ourselves. And so, for example, I had a huge project to do today, and I knew that it was going to take me outside of my comfort zone because of the amount of time I was going to be sitting in front of the computer. So I didn't judge it. It was kind of like I gave myself permission to do it, but then I had a lot of things that I did as mini breaks for taking care of myself, like moving the body and eating nutritionally and things like that, because I'm really, really aware of when my body starts to feel the stress. And whenever you're stressed, then you've reinforced the imprints and you get on that wheel, so to speak, where these unconscious patterns replicate themselves. So it's just a question of becoming more and more aware of how your body is responding to your environment, and that includes the people in it.
Right.
Okay.
Did that help, Lisa, from North Carolina, South Carolina?
Yes, it did.
Oh, good. Okay.
That helped a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in. We appreciate you. Thank you for listening.
All right.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. We have time we don't have much time. We have very little time. But if somebody has a I know, see, I have like 8 pages of notes, and I could have kept Kate O'Connell, I could have kept you online for another 3 hours. But it goes quickly, and that's why people have to buy the book. So let's tell them where you said it's your name backwards. So it's o'connellkate.com. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my clinical website.
Okay.
So it's OCONNELLKATE.com. The book is available on Amazon.com.
Mm-hmm. Beyond the Imprint.
The title being Beyond the Imprint.
Right.
And I actually, because this modality I realized is bigger than what I could have the capacity to evolve it into, I've created a nonprofit where an educational and health platform will develop, and we'll be taking this experience into the schools, the knowledge into the schools. I'll be training therapists. I'll be training teachers and administrators based on this material. And the nonprofit is called the Healing Alliance of Central Virginia, and that's HACVA.org.
Good. Awesome. That's awesome. So you'll be going into the schools and you'll be showing people, because really, honestly, this stuff, everything starts somewhere. And I think if you can go back to where the actual imprint began and then what triggers that, you can let it go. It's true. You have to become aware of what it is that you're thinking and feeling. You know, to me, the body feels and the brain thinks.
Yes.
So it kind of, and thoughts are electric and feelings to me are magnetic. So that's how we draw everything to us. So we have to get into what we're feeling and thinking. And that starts with something that happened to us, whether it was 2 days ago or 2 years ago or 25 years ago. It doesn't matter unless you address it and kind of unravel that imprint. It just sticks with us and we keep repeating it, I think. The names change and the faces change, but we just repeat the same. Is that kind of the gist of it? Right?
Well, yes, exactly. Yeah. And how you know that you're doing that is that you're not happy, like you're not fulfilled. You're mostly stressed. And so there is an opportunity to have a completely different life and a completely different experience.
Right. And so you may, like you said, if you divorce your husband or you get rid of the guy who's, beating you every other week, then unless you address it, there's something in there that started that somewhere. And it just, the next relationship will pick up where the last one left off. The next job will pick up where the last one, unless you kind of can go, oh, I get it, and I can work on that. And your book and your work, what you're doing is what addresses that. And I feel can really heal people because it is looking into where that began, not just let's talk about the same story over and over again. So that's why I like it.
Right.
Okay, we have time for one quick question. If anybody else wants to call in, 949-313-8880. It has to be kind of quick because we have run out of time. We only have another 10 minutes here on the show. So again, it's Kate O'Connell, and it's Kate, and her last name is O'Connell, O''Connell. Beyond the Imprint is the book. I mean, I could just talk to you for days. I didn't even touch on half of this stuff. But I love what you're doing. Huh?
You'll have to have me back.
I will, actually, when you get going. I mean, I love that you're doing a foundation. I mean, this is good work, because really, truly, it's astonishing what the statistics are on the kids out there that just, especially the ADHD. Everybody's ADHD now, and everybody's on medication for it.
Let me tell you something. The criteria for ADHD is trauma. It's trauma.
Yeah, exactly. Explain that a little bit.
And it's also, poor diet, lots of sugar, lots of additives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, because it's not just sugar. It's the additives in the food that they process food. It's, a lot of it's processed food. And I think that has a lot to do with it. And I think if you change someone's diet and you figure out what the trauma is, they're not ADHD. I think they're just excitable because they're just in that state. It's a state, not a disease. I believe.
Right.
In most cases.
I don't pathologize anything I sit with. We just understand what they're experiencing, and then from that point we support the body, and we do this modality, and it's incredible the change that happens and how quickly it happens.
Well, good. Yeah, because I'm not a doctor, so I can't really say, but I just know that a lot of the kids that I've worked with, and I'm sure you've worked with, and that you continue to work with, it helps. I mean, if they don't need that. So I'm glad you're doing that work, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. And we started to talk about this when the caller called in, but do you do sessions on the phone?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so you can have people, because you are a therapist, so they can come to you for help, and you just do it on the phone, over the phone, and they don't have to meet with you. No, I know you are. But I mean, some people just want to do it.
Remember, it's 10 o'clock here, so I'm getting a little giddy.
I know, me too, and it's not even 10 o'clock here. It's only almost 7, and I'm starting to get a little giddy. But some therapists prefer to do one-on-one. That's just how they work. But I know I do a lot of work on the phone. But I'm
evolving. This work is actually the vehicle for me evolving and expanding. Mm-hmm. So the nonprofit, making myself available to people across the country. I'm open. I just stay open, and I wouldn't say no to anything that I haven't tried. I've done enough long-distance sessions to know that they work. They're usually the kids that I've worked with for a while, and then they go off to college, and then we end up doing phone sessions from wherever they are. So that's how I know it still works.
Wow. Well, yeah. If they're still with you after all those years, of course. Now, do you do workshops at all? Do you do group sessions at all?
Well, that's what this nonprofit's going to allow me to do. And the other thing is that the more that I talk about this book and what I see in my practice, is I'm actually naming that this modality is the missing piece in the field of mental health counseling. If it were used exclusively with adolescents, it would change everything, because 90% of therapists won't work with adolescents, and they don't even understand why. It's because their unresolved imprinting is in the room, and adolescents are typically oppositional because they're refusing to conform to the conditioning, which is developmentally appropriate as they attempt to differentiate. But most therapists don't know what to do with that, whereas I'm very comfortable with it because I understand it, and I don't take whatever they say to me personally. What I've learned in working with the adolescents is that because I don't pathologize behaviors and because I truly understand what this developmental stage is about, it's almost as if in the first session, what I see, it's like I'm one of the few people that have ever truly seen them and understood them. And just in that moment, when they're being seen and heard for the first time in a while, then everything changes at that point, just because they're being seen and heard. And and they're not being told by an expert, i.e. therapist, that they're mixed up and they need to be on meds.
Right. Right. Well, because part of being an adolescent is just pushing back. I mean, that's part of how you grow.
That is what adolescence is. They'll take themselves off the planet before they'll conform to the conditioning.
Yeah, exactly.
So we really need to understand and remind ourselves what it means to be an adolescent. But what's happened is in our own narratives that we've created is that we are not allowing ourselves to connect to our own painful experiences of adolescence.
Right.
So there are just reflections, and we don't want to look at those particular reflections.
No. One of the things I liked about your book too, Kate, is that you're very honest. You know, and I can tell. I read a book a week. I've read 1 million books, but I love your authenticity. I mean, you talked about your life. You talked about the fact that it's in your book, so I can say this. You had your first drink when you were 8 years old. You've lived a life. You grew. I think you're probably. I mean, I was born in 1958, so I grew up like probably in the same time period frame.
Yeah, I was
somewhere.
born in.
Yeah. So, I know, I ran away when I was 14. People know this, I've done a lot, but you talk about it openly in your book. You talk about what you went through. You talk about your brother. Well, you talk about your mother who was told she had 6 months to live, and then lived 30 years, I think, which is great, but that's hard on a young child, to know that.
Well, I mean, and in hindsight, as an adult and as a therapist, having created this modality, it also helped me have a just incredible renewed appreciation for my mother and the trauma that she was attempting to get beyond and never did, because there was no such thing as therapy in 1961. If you were out of balance emotionally or mentally, you saw a psychiatrist.
Right.
But therapy hadn't really shown up. It's not in the suburbs of Toronto anyways.
No. And I believe I was in Montreal at that time. So no, there wasn't anything like that. And particularly with housewives, women that weren't working, and my mom had worked on and off, but in that time frame she wasn't, and it was kind of like if you complained, they would like put you away or something. It was like you didn't, they would. You just didn't do that. There was something wrong with you if you weren't okay, right. So they kind of, I think a lot of women, it just hit their mental issue. They just didn't have a voice.
There was no outlet for it.
Right.
And my mother was also quite brilliant and a writer. And it was very painful to be in this household with her unrealized potential. Despite everything that she attempted, I mean, she did publish, but there was a lot of suffering, and it was very palpable. And because of her traumas around, being told that she had 6 months to live after a radical mastectomy, and, that just sent reverberations through the family, and it kind of was always there. Like, it was always there in terms, because there was no test at that time that could be done to say that you were free of cancer. She basically was told to just, like, if she was still alive 5 years later, then chances are she survived it. That's kind of how it was done back then. And so, so there was always that cloud, and I was 3 when that happened, and I believe being left at home with someone who was told she had 6 months to live, that's when I began my imprinting as a therapist. Right. Because there's no way she was available for me.
No, exactly.
Not at all.
And you were available for her. You were already caretaking, whether you knew it or not, know?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
See, look at that. Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I know.
We're out of time. So yes, Kate, we're going to have you back. I barely touched on this. I barely touched on all of that, but I do like that you brought all of that into the book as well, because it's important. And I actually was spellbound by the part at the end where you just opened up and talked about your life and your brother and all of these, your mother and your father, all of that. Just it made everything else make sense, and it made me understand you. And I thought, wow, this is good, and your work is really important. And I felt like I knew you after that, even though I don't. But I know that our paths will cross again, and we will do the show again. But I want to tell everybody where to find you and promote your book, Beyond the Imprint. It is on Amazon.com. I do believe it's also on your website, right, Kate? Kate O'Connell?
Yes.
It's o'connellkate.com, right?
It's o'connellkate.com, yes.
Right. And are you going to do another book at all?
Funny you should ask.
Yes.
It's going to be a trilogy. It's
Good.
going to be a trilogy. The second one has been started. It's called Getting Beyond the Imprint. It's a didactic manual that will teach everybody how to take them through this modality.
Right.
And then the third one, I'm still not 100% if this is the title, but it's At Peace Beyond the Imprint. It's the spiritual framework. So I get to talk about karma, enlightenment, how all of this relates.
Right. Okay. Well,
That's
how'd I know that? I
spiritual
knew
book.
there was another book. That's why I was like, I knew there's another book. So yes, and that's exactly what the caller that called in, Lisa that called in, I can't remember if she was from North or South Carolina, but the Carolinas.
South Carolina.
Yeah, she's South Carolina. That's exactly what she was asking for your next book. She was asking how to do that. So now you just have to hurry up and write it. you have a buyer. You have a buyer already. But listen, Kate, I want you back on the show before you do your next book. So for sure, next year, early next year, I want to touch on this again about the imprint and our DNA and how we can change our own DNA, because we can. We can.
Yes.
So with anything, mentally and physically, I do believe that. So, and it can be done, and I do want to talk to you. And anyway, thank you for calling in from Charlottesville, Virginia on a Sunday night. It's late there. Like you said, we're all getting a little giddy and funny, and it's later for you than it is for me. But what a great show, and what a lot of really good information for people out there. Thank you for joining me, and I appreciate it. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Take care. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
What a great show. She's wonderful. Her name again is Kate O'Connell. She's written a book called Beyond the Imprint. I can't say enough about it because she does talk about something on a cellular level where real change happens, and I promote that all the time. So you do have to change internally on a consciousness level, and that is your DNA. That is how your mind thinks, how your body feels. You have to be able to change that before anything else changes. And how do you change that? One of the ways is to be you to the full, because that is what's truly beautiful. You have to be your authentic self. Be you. Love you. Have the time of your life with yourself. Be in love with who you are. That's what makes life beautiful. That's what makes your life happen. And you know what? It happens easily, and it happens just effortlessly, because you're just being you. And when you're just being you to your authentic true self, you flow. And when you get in that flow, life is beautiful. Thank you for joining me. I hope you do again next week. I'll be back with Intuitive Inc. Live next Sunday. Thank you so much. Take care and good night.